Welcome to my channel. Today, I want to talk about something close to my heart and very real in my life. Driving safely once you're over the age of 70. You see, for so many of us, driving is not just about getting from one place to another. It represents freedom, independence, and dignity. I still remember the day I got my driver's license in my teenage years. The world felt wide open. Back then, I could drive for hours without even thinking about it. Clear eyes, quick reflexes, and plenty of energy. But time has a way of changing things, and when you reach your 70s, you realize driving isn't quite the same as it used to be. I'll be honest with you, at first, I didn't want to admit it. I kept telling myself, I've been driving for 50 years, surely I know what I'm doing. Driving had become second nature to me, like breathing or walking. I thought I could handle anything on the road. But then the little reminders started creeping in, quietly but persistently, and they were hard to ignore. One day, I rolled right past a stop sign that I would have noticed instantly in my younger years. It wasn't that I was careless, it was that my reaction time wasn't what it used to be. Another time, while driving home after dinner with friends, I found myself squinting to read a street sign. The glare from the oncoming headlights seemed to spread across my entire windshield, turning something as simple as reading a sign into a struggle. That was when I realized that night driving had become much more challenging than I wanted to admit. And then there's the traffic today. It feels different than it did decades ago. Back in the 60s or 70s, the roads weren't nearly as crowded, and people seemed a little less distracted. Now, with smartphones buzzing, cars weaving in and out, and drivers rushing everywhere, the pace of the road has picked up in a way that can be overwhelming. I still remember when driving on the highway felt like freedom, a chance to stretch out the car and cruise. These days, it feels more like navigating through a storm, with constant lane changes and aggressive drivers who seem to think they own the road. Those small reminders, the missed stop sign, the blinding headlights, the restless traffic, they all came together to shake me in a way I hadn't felt before. They whispered a truth I didn't want to face, that I couldn't rely on old habits anymore. My body, my senses, and the world around me had all changed. And I realized that if I didn't start paying closer attention, if I didn't adjust, I could put not only myself at risk but also every pedestrian, every cyclist, every family sharing the road with me. It was a humbling moment and in some ways a sobering one. But it was also the beginning of me becoming a more mindful, deliberate driver in this stage of my life. One of the very first changes I made after noticing those struggles was scheduling regular checkups for my eyes and ears. It may sound simple, almost too basic, but believe me, it makes a world of difference. I've worn glasses for most of my life. Reading glasses when I hit middle age, stronger lenses as the years went by. But after crossing into my 70s, I realized just how quickly vision can change without you even noticing. Cataracts, glaucoma, macular degeneration. These are not just words doctors throw around, they're real conditions that can sneak up quietly. And sometimes it's not even a major diagnosis. Sometimes it's just the fact that your night vision gets weaker, or your peripheral vision isn't as sharp as it once was. These small shifts may not seem important at first, but on the road, even a fraction of a second or a slight blur in vision can be the difference between safety and danger. I'll never forget my friend Joe's story. Joe was the kind of guy who always believed he was fine. Never needed help, never needed checkups, or so he thought. For years, his wife nagged him to go get his eyes tested, but he'd laugh it off. "I can see just fine," he'd say, waving his hand as if it were nonsense. Then one evening, while driving home from dinner, he came up to an intersection and failed to notice a cyclist crossing right in front of him. At the very last second, he slammed on his brakes. The cyclist fell, but thank heavens wasn't badly injured. Still, that close call shook Joe to his core. He finally admitted that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't seeing the road as clearly as he used to. That incident wasn't just a lesson for Joe, it was a wake-up call for all of us in our circle of friends. We started comparing notes, talking openly about the things we had been ignoring or brushing off. Some of us noticed more glare from headlights. Others complained of dry eyes or trouble judging distances. I realized then that skipping an eye exam wasn't just risky for me, it was reckless for everyone sharing the road with me. So now I never miss an appointment. I treat those visits to the eye doctor the same way I treat putting on my seatbelt, non-negotiable. And it's not just about me being able to see a stoplight or a street sign, it's about protecting the people around me. When I sit behind the wheel, I carry a responsibility not only to myself but to every pedestrian stepping off the curb, every child riding a bike, every driver in the lane beside me. My eyes are not just my own, they're part of the collective safety of the road. That's why I go, why I get checked, and why I encourage every senior I meet to do the same. It isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Hearing is another area that so many of us tend to overlook, sometimes even more than our eyesight. For years, I thought of myself as a pretty sharp listener. I could follow conversations, hear the television without turning the volume up too high, and I figured that was proof enough that my ears were just fine. But what I didn't realize is how much I relied on my hearing in ways that weren't obvious, especially when driving. The truth hit me one afternoon when I was on my way back from the grocery store. I was stopped at a light when suddenly traffic around me seemed to part like the Red Sea. Cars were pulling over and I couldn't figure out why, until out of the corner of my eye, I finally saw the flashing lights of an ambulance barreling toward the intersection. I hadn't heard the siren at all. My heart sank. By the time I reacted, it was almost too late. That moment scared me more than I like to admit. I went home that day and thought about how often we take our hearing for granted. Unlike eyesight, where you can tell immediately if a sign looks blurry or letters look fuzzy, hearing loss sneaks up on you in subtle ways. You don't notice the sounds you're missing. You just notice the silence. And silence, when you're on the road, can be dangerous. It could mean not hearing the horn of a car in your blind spot, or the warning bell of a railroad crossing, or the screech of brakes behind you. All of those sounds are signals that help keep us safe, and without them it's like driving with one of your senses switched off. That ambulance scare was the push I needed to finally schedule a hearing test. I won't lie, I dreaded it. There's something humbling about sitting in that soundproof booth, pressing a button every time you think you hear a faint beep. Part of me didn't want to know the results, but deep down I knew it was better to face the truth than to keep pretending. When the audiologist explained that my hearing had indeed declined and recommended hearing aids, I hesitated at first. I didn't want to admit I needed them. But I'll tell you this, the first time I put them in and walked outside, I was astonished. I could hear the crunch of gravel under my shoes, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, and most importantly, the familiar but long-forgotten sound of birds chirping in my yard. Now, I wear my hearing aids faithfully every day, especially when I drive. They're not a burden, they're a lifeline. They allow me to hear my grandchildren laughing in the back seat, the soft click of my turn signal, the hum of the engine, and yes, the crucial sounds of the road like sirens, horns, and approaching traffic. In many ways, they've given me back a sense of confidence I didn't even realize I had lost. And let me tell you, there's no shame in it. If anything, wearing hearing aids shows strength. It shows that I value my safety and the safety of everyone around me enough to do what's necessary. Another adjustment I eventually had to make was rethinking not just how I drive, but when and where I drive. For decades, I never thought twice about hopping in the car at night. Whether it was heading to a late movie, driving home after a family gathering, or taking a long trip where much of the journey happened after sundown. But as I got older, I began to notice something unsettling. Night driving wasn't as easy as it once was. The glare from oncoming headlights, which I used to brush off without a thought, now felt like blinding spotlights directly aimed at my eyes. Streetlights seemed dimmer, and everything beyond the reach of my headlights blurred into shadows. My depth perception had slipped as well, and I often found myself second-guessing the distance of an approaching car or the curve of the road ahead. At first, I fought against the idea of giving up night driving. It felt like surrendering a piece of my independence, like admitting I was no longer capable of doing something I'd done effortlessly my whole life. I told myself it was just a bad night, maybe I was tired, maybe my glasses weren't clean enough. But the truth kept coming back every time I drove after dark. an uneasiness in my chest, a creeping sense of vulnerability I couldn't ignore. And when you start to feel that way behind the wheel, you know it's time to make a change. So I made a rule for myself: avoid driving after dark whenever possible. At first, I resented the restriction. I missed late-night drives to the diner with friends, or being able to stay at family gatherings until the very end without worrying about the trip home. But then something surprising happened. Once I committed to daytime driving, I felt an incredible weight lift off my shoulders. Suddenly, I was no longer anxious about the glare of headlights or the uncertainty of dimly lit roads. I could plan my outings during daylight hours, when my eyes were at their best and my confidence was steady. In fact, this change ended up giving me more peace of mind than I expected. By choosing to drive during the day, I wasn't losing independence. I was gaining control. I became more intentional with my schedule. I'd arrange doctor's appointments in the morning, plan lunch dates instead of dinners, and run errands earlier so I could be home well before dark. What once felt like a loss actually became a way of taking charge of my safety. And to my surprise, I started enjoying these routines. Morning drives to the grocery store meant I could take my time, avoid the evening rush, and even bump into neighbors doing the same thing. Afternoon outings gave me a chance to soak in the daylight, notice the changing seasons, and truly savor the drive itself. In the end, stepping back from night driving wasn't a defeat, it was an act of wisdom. It allowed me to continue driving with confidence while acknowledging the changes that come with age. And instead of focusing on what I couldn't do, I learned to appreciate what I could do, and to do it with a clearer mind and a steadier hand. Highways have become another challenge for me in recent years. When I was younger, I absolutely loved them. There was something exhilarating about merging onto the freeway, feeling the car hum beneath me as I accelerated, and watching the miles fly by as I headed toward some new adventure. Back then, highways meant freedom, long road trips with the windows down, family vacations with the kids asleep in the back seat, late-night drives across state lines just to see what was out there. I thrived on the speed, the rhythm of the lanes, the constant forward motion. But now, in my 70s, highways feel very different. The sheer speed alone can be intimidating. Cars whip past me like bullets, sometimes weaving recklessly in and out of traffic. Drivers today seem more impatient than ever, distracted by phones or rushing to get somewhere in record time. Split-second decisions that once came easily to me now feel heavier, requiring more focus than I sometimes have to give. Changing lanes at 65 miles per hour isn't quite as smooth when your reflexes aren't what they used to be. Even keeping track of all the signs, exits, and merging cars can feel overwhelming at times. I found myself gripping the steering wheel tighter, my shoulders tense, my eyes darting back and forth, scanning constantly for hazards. And I began to ask myself, was this really worth it? Was this stress, this constant pressure, the way I wanted to spend my time behind the wheel? That's when I started making a different choice. Instead of taking the highways, I began to look for alternative routes. Slower, quieter roads that wind through towns and countryside instead of roaring traffic lanes. At first, it felt inconvenient. The drive took longer and I had to adjust to planning extra time for my trips. But soon I realized those so-called delays were actually gifts. On these scenic routes, I started noticing things I had long overlooked. I saw old oak trees standing proud along the roadside, small farms with red barns, children riding bikes down country lanes. I passed through little towns I never would have seen from the highway, towns with family-owned diners, antique shops, and bakeries where I could stop for coffee and a slice of pie. Those slower drives reminded me of what I used to love about being on the road in the first place. The sense of connection, of really seeing the world around me rather than just racing through it. Now I look forward to these drives. I put on some music from my younger days, rolled down the window, and let myself enjoy the journey rather than rush to the destination. It's a slower pace, yes, but it's also richer, calmer, and more joyful. In many ways, choosing scenic routes has given me back something I didn't realize I had lost: the pure pleasure of driving. The highways may still be there, full of speed and chaos, but I don't feel like I'm missing out. Instead, I feel like I've reclaimed the part of driving that always mattered most, the simple joy of the ride. Over time, I've learned that one of the most important parts of staying safe as an older driver is being brutally honest with myself about the warning signs. It's easy to dismiss little mistakes, to brush them off as nothing, but I know deep down that ignoring them only puts me and others at risk. If I find myself getting lost on familiar roads I've driven 100 times before, that's not just a harmless slip of memory. That's a signal that my concentration or spatial awareness may not be as sharp as it used to be. If I sit behind the wheel and immediately feel a knot of anxiety in my chest, dreading the drive ahead, I know that's my body telling me something isn't right. Those feelings are not to be ignored. They are warnings that I need to listen to carefully. And then there are the voices of the people who love me. At first, I didn't want to hear them. Nobody likes being told that something they've done all their life might now be unsafe. When my daughter gently told me, "Dad, I worry when you drive at night," my pride bristled. I wanted to defend myself, to say, "I've been driving longer than you've been alive." But as her words sank in, I realized she wasn't trying to take away my freedom. She wasn't criticizing me or doubting my abilities, she was expressing love. She was saying she wanted me around, safe and healthy, for many more years to come. That shift in perspective changed everything for me. Listening to our loved ones can sometimes be one of the hardest things to do because it feels like admitting weakness. But in reality, it's one of the wisest and bravest choices we can make. I've started to see their concerns not as limits but as lifelines. My son once suggested I avoid driving on the interstate during rush hour. Instead of taking it as an insult, I tried it, and you know what? He was right. The calmer, slower road suited me better, and I felt far less stressed. I think sometimes we older drivers forget that our families see things from the outside that we can't always recognize ourselves. We might think everything is fine, but they notice the small swerves, the hesitation at intersections, or the way our eyes squint harder at signs. Their perspective is valuable, and their concern comes from a place of care, not control. These days, if my children or even close friends share their worries, I stop and truly think about what they're saying instead of dismissing it. Being honest with myself, and open to the honesty of others, has made me a safer driver. It has also taught me humility. Accepting that I can't drive the way I used to doesn't diminish who I am. If anything, it shows that I care enough about life, about my family, and about strangers on the road to acknowledge my limits. There's strength in admitting that things have changed, and wisdom in adjusting before those changes lead to something irreversible. Of course, safety behind the wheel isn't just about avoiding accidents. It's also about being ready in case something unexpected happens. That's a lesson I learned the hard way one cold winter evening many years ago. I was driving home from visiting an old friend when my car broke down on a stretch of country road with no houses or gas stations nearby. Back then, I didn't have a cell phone, and I sat there shivering in the dark, waiting for someone to pass by. Hours went by before a kind stranger finally stopped and offered help. That experience stuck with me, and ever since then, I've made it a rule never to take preparedness lightly. These days, I keep a small but thoughtful emergency kit in my car at all times. Inside is a bottle of water or two, some non-perishable snacks like granola bars, and a warm blanket that could make a huge difference on a cold night. I also carry a sturdy flashlight with extra batteries, because you never know when you might have to check a tire or signal for help in the dark. There's even a basic first aid kit tucked away because at my age, and really at any age, it's better to be cautious than caught off guard. Technology has added another layer of safety. My phone is always fully charged before I leave the house, and I keep a charger in the car just in case. I've also gotten into the habit of sharing my location with my kids whenever I take a longer drive. At first, I wasn't sure about it. It felt like giving up a little privacy, but over time, I realized it actually gives me peace of mind. If anything goes wrong, they'll know where I am, and that knowledge helps both them and me feel safer. Some people might think all this preparation sounds unnecessary, maybe even overcautious. But I don't see it that way. To me, being prepared isn't about expecting disaster. It's about ensuring peace of mind. When I know I've got water, food, warmth, light, and a way to call for help, I feel more confident every time I start the engine. I know that if something does happen, I won't be caught completely off guard. That confidence lets me focus on the road instead of worrying about what-ifs. In many ways, being prepared is just another form of respect. For myself, for my family, and for the world around me. It means I've thought ahead, that I value safety, and that I'm willing to take small steps to make sure I can handle whatever comes my way. And honestly, at this stage in life, peace of mind is one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself. Now, I know some of you listening may be asking yourselves the hardest question of all. When is it time to hang up the keys for good? I'll be honest, that's not a decision any of us want to face, and it certainly isn't one with a simple answer. It's not like a birthday where someone can point to a number and say, that's the cutoff. No, it's far more personal than that. Each of us ages differently. Some people remain sharp and capable well into their 80s, while others may struggle much earlier. For me, I've come to believe the key lies in being honest with myself. As long as I can see well enough, hear clearly, and stay alert and confident on the road, I plan to keep driving, even if it's only short distances to the store, church, or the doctor's office. But I also carry the awareness that a day may come when that's no longer true. Maybe I'll miss too many signs, or my reflexes will slow just enough to make me a danger. When that time arrives, I don't want to cling desperately to the steering wheel out of pride. Instead, I want to be ready emotionally to let go with grace. That doesn't mean I won't feel the sting. After all, driving has been a part of my identity since I was a teenager. But it does mean I've started preparing myself mentally for the transition. I remind myself often that letting go of driving doesn't mean letting go of independence. It doesn't mean becoming a burden. It simply means finding new ways to stay connected and mobile. These days, there are more options than ever before. Rides from family members who are often more than willing to help, community shuttles that serve seniors in many towns, and even ride-sharing apps like Uber and Lyft that can be as easy to use as dialing a number. At first, I was hesitant about those apps, but after trying them with my daughter, I realized they could actually give me freedom without the stress of driving. My neighbor Mary is a perfect example. She finally gave up her license at 82. She told me something that has stayed with me ever since. I thought I'd feel trapped, but instead I felt relieved. I didn't realize how much I was worrying every time I got behind the wheel. Her words opened my eyes. Sometimes we think we're holding on to freedom when in truth we're holding on to fear. For Mary, giving up the keys wasn't the end, it was the beginning of a new kind of peace. She started carpooling with friends, using senior transportation services in our community, and she discovered she actually got out more often than she did when she drove. Hearing her story made me realize that life after driving doesn't have to be a prison. It can be an opportunity to lean on others, to rediscover trust in your family and community, and to focus your energy on the things you love instead of the stress of navigating traffic. And when my own time comes, I hope I'll remember Mary's words and feel not only acceptance, but maybe even relief. Because at the end of the day, giving up driving doesn't mean the end of living. It just means a new chapter, one where safety and connection matter more than stubborn pride. At the end of the day, when I think about what it really means to stay safe while driving over 70, I don't see it as a story of fear or limitation. I see it as a story of wisdom. Wisdom is something we earn after decades of living, learning, and surviving challenges we never thought we'd get through. And that wisdom gives us the courage to be honest with ourselves, to recognize when something is becoming too risky, and to make adjustments before tragedy strikes. Driving at this stage of life is not about proving we can still keep up with the younger folks. It's about being mindful of our changing abilities and respecting the fact that our choices behind the wheel don't just affect us. They ripple out to every pedestrian crossing the street, every child in the backseat of the car next to us, every family driving home from a long day. Each decision we make, whether to slow down, to skip a nighttime drive, or eventually to hand over the keys, is part of protecting not just ourselves but everyone we share the road with. That, to me, is the highest form of responsibility. And here's something I've learned the older I get. Letting go of something doesn't mean life becomes smaller. Quite the opposite. Sometimes it frees us to live larger in ways we never expected. When we no longer carry the stress of watching for every headlight glare at night or gripping the steering wheel tight in heavy traffic, we make room for more peace, more connection, and more joy. I think of my friend who gave up driving and started riding along with her daughter more often. She told me those car rides turned into some of the best conversations they'd ever had. That's not a loss, that's a gift. So if you're still driving, stay safe. Drive smart, drive alert, and remember to give yourself grace when you need to make adjustments. And if the day comes when it's time to step away from driving, don't see it as the closing of a door. See it as opening a new one, a chapter filled with different kinds of freedom, with new adventures, and with the peace of knowing you are protecting yourself and those around you. My friends, true independence doesn't come from clinging tightly to the steering wheel. It comes from embracing life as it is, with open eyes and an open heart, willing to adapt, willing to trust, and willing to keep moving forward in whatever way we can. So wherever the road leads you, whether behind the wheel or in the passenger seat, may it be a safe one, a meaningful one, and one filled with the wisdom you've spent a lifetime gathering. And you know, as I sit here and think about all of this, I realize something important. Life is not measured by how long we hold on to certain abilities like driving, but by how gracefully we adapt when things change. When I was younger, I thought independence meant doing everything myself, fixing the leaky faucet, climbing on the roof to clean gutters, driving through snowstorms without blinking an eye. But now, in my 70s, I see independence differently. It's not about doing everything alone. It's about making choices that keep me safe, that keep me healthy, and that allow me to enjoy the years I have left with as much peace and purpose as possible. That's why, when I talk about driving over 70, I don't want anyone to feel ashamed if it's becoming more challenging. There's no shame in recognizing that our bodies and minds are different than they used to be. In fact, I'd argue that it takes real courage to acknowledge it. Anyone can ignore the warning signs, but it takes a strong, wise soul to say, I need to make a change. That is not weakness, that is strength. I've had friends who waited too long. Some insisted they could handle the road until a small mistake turned into a serious accident. I've seen the heartbreak of families who wish their loved one had made a safer choice sooner. And I've also seen the relief, the gratitude, when someone decides to step back before something tragic happens. In those moments, the family gathers closer, new routines are built, and yes, sometimes new joys are discovered. The rides together, the walks in the neighborhood instead of quick car trips, the time spent noticing life at a slower pace. Those are the things that linger in the heart long after the car keys are set aside. And let's not forget, we live in a world with more options than ever before. There are rideshare apps, senior shuttles, community buses, and good neighbors willing to lend a hand. Years ago, not driving might have meant real isolation. But today, with a phone call or a few taps on a screen, help can be on the way. The world is changing, and if we're willing to embrace those changes, we don't lose freedom. We gain new ways of staying connected. So, my message to anyone listening is this. Driving over 70 is not the end of independence. It is simply a stage of life where independence takes a new form. Stay sharp, stay mindful, and most of all, stay safe. And if the time comes when you feel the road is asking too much of you, know that it's okay to let go. Because the journey of life doesn't stop when the car does. It just finds a different road. Thanks for spending this time with me. If you found value in my story, I hope it reminds you that every age carries its own kind of wisdom. May your roads be safe, may your heart stay open, and may you always find joy in the journey, whether you're in the driver's seat, the passenger seat, or simply walking alongside those you love. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, please share it with a friend or family member who might benefit. And remember, driving at our age isn't about proving anything. It's about enjoying the journey, staying safe, and knowing when to adjust. Stay strong, stay wise, and take care on the road ahead.